The morning she asked for space, it wasn't stormy or dramatic. It was the kind of morning that should have felt peaceful, sunlight breaking through the blinds, coffee brewing in the kitchen, her bare feet curled under her on the couch. But I felt the weight of her silence before she even opened her mouth. "James," she said softly, not quite meeting my eyes. "I think I need some time. To think. To figure things out." My heart stuttered in my chest. We'd been together for nearly 3 years, and though we had our moments, every couple does, I'd never felt us drifting apart. Sure, she had been quieter lately, distant even, but I chalked it up to work stress and life. I never imagined she'd need space from me. I didn't fight her. I just listened. Lily was always the kind of woman who needed to feel like she was in control of her own mind, her own path. And maybe that was part of what I loved about her. She thought deeply, felt even deeper. But this time, it wasn't just about her emotions. It was about us. About the life we've been building. "It's not that I don't love you," she added quickly, as if the words would soften the blow. I need clarity. I need to know what I really want before I keep moving forward. I don't want to hurt you by pretending to be sure when I'm not." That was the part that hit hardest. Because I was sure. Sure about her. Sure about us. Sure that I wanted to keep moving forward, even if the path was uncertain at times. But her words told me she wasn't ready to walk beside me anymore, at least not right now. So I gave her what she asked for. I didn't argue. Didn't beg her to stay. I just nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said, "Okay. Take whatever time you need." I moved out that afternoon, back to the apartment I had before we met. It still smelled faintly of old wood and cologne, as if waiting to be lived in again. I remember setting my keys down on the countertop and realizing how foreign the place now felt. How quickly it stopped being home once Lily had entered my life. Over the next few days, I tried to stay busy. Work helped. Friends checked in. I told them I was fine. And for a while, I believed I was. Because deep down, I thought this was temporary. That Lily just needed to quiet the noise in her head and would come back when she realized we made sense. But time has a way of changing things. What started as space to think became a silence I wasn't prepared for. No calls. No texts. Just echoes of her voice in the empty rooms of my mind. And I, the man who always made space for her emotions, began to realize, maybe she didn't need space to find clarity. Maybe she needed courage. Courage to love someone fully, or to admit she couldn't. The first few days after Lily left felt like walking through a fog. I told myself she just needed space, time to recalibrate. That was the word she used, calibrate, as if love were a machine that could be measured and realigned. So, I gave her that time. I stayed quiet. I didn't reach out, even when every part of me wanted to send her a message, just to hear her voice or see her name light up my screen. At first, I believed this was healthy. Respectful. It was what she asked for, and I loved her enough to give it. I kept my distance because I thought that's what mature love required: patience, trust, the willingness to let someone go and hope they come back. But patience has a funny way of morphing into self-deception. As the days turned into weeks, the silence stopped feeling respectful and started feeling like abandonment. Still, I held on. I told myself she was working through something profound, something only she could understand. Maybe she was digging through the debris of past hurts, fears, all the things she never said out loud. Maybe she was going to come back stronger, clearer. Maybe. But maybe can be a cruel kind of hope. It stretches out time, turns every passing day into a question with no answer. Every night I went to bed wondering if tomorrow would be the day she'd call, say she missed me, that the space helped her see things more clearly. But tomorrow never brought anything but more silence. I kept her toothbrush in the cup by the sink longer than I should have. Her robe stayed draped over the back of my bedroom door. I'd catch myself glancing at the door, half expecting it to open, half expecting her to walk in like nothing happened, like she just needed a little air. But the door never moved, and neither did she. It wasn't just the absence of Lily that haunted me, it was the absence of answers. There was no fight. No betrayal. Just a slow fade into nothing. That kind of uncertainty sinks deeper than anger. At least with anger, you have a direction to point your pain. But with this? With waiting? The pain has nowhere to go. It just loops inside of you, endlessly. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, picked up old hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I even went on a couple of dates, at the urging of well-meaning friends. But I wasn't really there. I kept comparing every smile, every glance, every laugh to hers. No one else had her way of speaking with her eyes, or the way she'd curl up into herself when she was thinking deeply about something. I wasn't ready to let go. I was still waiting. The truth was, the longer I waited, the more I started to feel like I was standing in a room where the lights had been turned off. I knew the outlines of everything, where the furniture was, the pictures on the walls, but I couldn't see anything clearly anymore. My memories of us were still there, but they started to feel fragile, uncertain. I began asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Did she ever really love me? Was I just convenient? A phase? A safety net she outgrew? And yet, even with all the doubt, I kept hoping. That maybe she was scared. Maybe she just needed to face those fears on her own and would come back to me when she realized I was home. That's the thing about love, it makes you hope against logic. You'd think silence would be enough of a message. But when your heart is still speaking, silence feels like a misunderstanding. Then came the moment that started to change everything. I was walking through the park one evening, the one we used to go to on Sunday afternoons. There was a couple sitting on a bench, laughing about something small and silly. And for a second, I felt this strange mix of envy and grief. Because it hit me, I was waiting for someone who wasn't choosing me. I was holding space in my life for someone who hadn't called in weeks. No explanation. No check-in. Nothing. And that realization didn't come with fireworks or a dramatic inner monologue. It just settled quietly into my bones, like a truth that had always been there, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling for hours. Not crying, not angry. Just done. Not with Lily, necessarily, but with waiting. With giving so much of myself to someone who couldn't decide if they wanted me. And that's when I realized, maybe this wasn't about her needing time. Maybe it was about me needing to stop giving mine away to someone who didn't know what to do with it. There wasn't a singular moment that made me decide to walk away, no climactic confrontation, no message from Lily declaring that she had made her choice. What changed was something far quieter, something internal. It happened gradually, the way the tide pulls away from the shore. You don't notice the receding water at first. But then you look up and realize that the waves don't come in anymore. After weeks of waiting, of holding on to hope, I began to understand something I hadn't wanted to admit: I was being forgotten. Not with malice, not out of cruelty, but through inaction, through avoidance, through the kind of silence that tells its own story. The hardest part was accepting that she had the freedom to disappear from our shared life without warning, and I had been left in the shadow of that decision, clinging to the memory of something she had already let go of. I kept looking for signs that she was still tethered to us, that she still cared. But there were none. Not a single message to check in. Not a question about how I was doing. Not a trace of someone who once told me I was her home. That realization didn't come with rage. It came with stillness. I remember sitting at my kitchen table on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, staring at the steam curling off my coffee, and thinking, this is it. This is the moment I stop waiting. Not because I want to. But because I have to. Because I am finally seeing the truth I've been trying not to. Loving someone doesn't mean you should stand still while they run from you. It doesn't mean you put your own life on pause so they can explore theirs. And it certainly doesn't mean you become an afterthought while they search for a clarity they may never find. I had given Lily room, time, silence, compassion, but in doing so, I had also surrendered my dignity, piece by piece. So, I made the decision. Quietly, and without ceremony. I didn't post anything cryptic on social media. I didn't call her one last time to deliver some dramatic farewell. Instead, I packed up the box I'd been avoiding, the one filled with her things she'd left at my place. Her favorite sweater, the novel she never finished, the half-used bottle of her perfume that still clung to the lining of my closet. I didn't smell it this time. I just put it all away. One item after another. Gently, deliberately. I didn't even cry. That surprised me. I thought the finality would crush me. But it didn't. It just felt like closing a door I had been holding open too long, waiting for someone who no longer remembered how to walk through it. That night, I deleted our photos from my phone. Not in anger. But because they were starting to feel like postcards from a place that didn't exist anymore. I backed them up, sure, I'm not made of stone, but I didn't want them front and center. I needed to make room for new memories, ones that didn't begin and end with her absence. Walking away isn't always about leaving the other person. Sometimes it's about returning to yourself. For months, I had centered my life around Lily's potential return. My days were measured by how close or far I felt from the version of us I used to believe in. I had postponed joy, avoided connection, resisted change, all in the name of what if. But what if was a ghost? And I couldn't build a life around a ghost. When I started living for myself again, truly, not just pretending, I realized how much of me had gone missing in that relationship. Not because Lily asked me to lose myself, but because I had offered pieces of me freely, believing it was what love required. I had bent and waited and molded myself around her indecision, hoping she would someday do the same. But love isn't meant to be a puzzle where one person waits to be completed. It's meant to be a meeting place, where two whole people choose to stay. And Lily wasn't choosing. She was drifting. The day after I packed her things, I went for a long drive. No destination in mind, just the open road and the sound of the rain tapping the roof of my car. I ended up at a small coastal town 2 hours from the city. I walked along the beach, the wind cold against my skin, and I breathed deeper than I had in weeks. There, standing at the edge of the sea, I said goodbye to her in my own way. Not out loud. Not dramatically. But quietly, in my mind. I let her go, not because I stopped loving her, but because I loved myself enough to stop waiting. That was the real decision. Not to give up, but to grow forward. Not to erase her from my story, but to close the chapter with grace. She had taken her time to think. I had taken my time to heal. And now it was time to move on. Not because I had to. But because I deserved to. Regret doesn't arrive like a sudden storm, it creeps in slowly, slipping through the cracks of certainty and growing in the quiet moments we think we have under control. That's how it began for Lily. At first, there was relief. A sense of lightness in the solitude she had claimed. No more questions to answer, no pressure to explain emotions she couldn't yet define. She told herself she needed clarity, but what she really needed was distance, from the love that frightened her, from the idea of permanence she had never learned to trust. In the beginning, she welcomed the silence. Her apartment, newly rearranged, felt like her own again. She filled her evenings with books she hadn't touched in years, made dinners for one without considering someone else's taste, and focused on her morning rituals like they were sacred. She told friends she was finding herself, figuring out what she wanted. She framed the break as an act of empowerment. But empowerment without direction is a hollow victory. Lily's turning point came one Saturday evening, maybe 4 or 5 weeks after James had faded from her life without complaint or confrontation. She was curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, watching an old movie, one she and James had stumbled across during a lazy Sunday 2 winters ago. At the time, they'd laughed through the awkward dialogue and wrapped themselves in a blanket like teenagers. The memory was small, but it was vivid, and in that quiet moment, it hit her: she didn't laugh like that anymore. The absence started to feel real then, not just conceptual. James was no longer waiting on the other end of her silence. He wasn't reaching out. He wasn't checking in to see if she was okay or if her mind had settled into something certain. At first, she told herself it was because he respected her boundaries. But soon, she began to wonder if he had simply let go. And the more she thought about that possibility, the deeper the ache grew. She started checking his social media, something she hadn't done in the first few weeks. He was there, smiling in a photo at a friend's gathering, sharing a book recommendation, walking through a park with someone's golden retriever. He didn't look devastated. He didn't look like a man waiting for someone to come back. That was the moment the weight of her choice finally landed. Regret, when it's honest, doesn't scream, it whispers. It reminded her of how James used to wait in the kitchen to pour her coffee first. How he listened with his full attention, like every word she said mattered. How he never rushed her, even when she was slow to open up, when she hesitated to say, "I love you," for the first time. And how, in return, she asked him for space she didn't use to grow, but to avoid. She had assumed he'd be there when she was ready. That love like his didn't just walk away. But that was her mistake. James didn't walk away in anger. He walked away in quiet understanding. He saw the truth before she did. He realized that love requires mutual clarity, not just time apart. In the days that followed, Lily tried to distract herself with the things she thought she wanted: solo hikes, spontaneous weekend plans, coffee dates with friends who encouraged her to embrace her independence. But even surrounded by freedom, she felt empty. Every conversation reminded her of his insight. Every silence reminded her of what she used to have. She began composing messages in her head. "I miss you. Can we talk? I think I made a mistake." But she never hit send. Each day she waited, hoping she'd hear from him first, hoping he was thinking of her too. But days turned into weeks, and her inbox stayed quiet. The one person who always showed up for her had stopped. It wasn't until she ran into a mutual friend at the grocery store that she learned James had truly moved on. He had met someone. It was new, but real. A woman who made him laugh, who asked him how he was feeling without needing to be asked first. Lily forced a smile, nodded politely, and finished her shopping, but when she got home, she cried in a way she hadn't since he left. It wasn't the pain of jealousy, it was the pain of realization. She hadn't lost James because of a fight or betrayal. She lost him because she mistook his patience for permanence. Because she thought he'd always wait. And now that he was gone, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, wholeheartedly, she understood the cost of indecision. There is a particular kind of regret that comes when you realize someone was right in front of you, offering everything you needed, and you asked them to leave while you figured out what you already knew. Lily now lived with that regret every day. In the quiet of the mornings. In the echo of her unanswered messages. In the ache of memory that no longer had a place to land. Time moved on, as it always does, indifferent to heartbreak. For Lily, the days began to stretch, not with opportunity, but with weight. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, began to feel like a museum of avoidance. The furniture she had rearranged in the name of independence now felt misaligned, the silence she once craved now oppressive. She tried to reach James. Eventually, the longing overwhelmed her pride. She typed out a message, carefully worded, yet aching with subtext: "Hey. I've been thinking about you a lot. I hope we can talk sometime. I miss what we had." She hovered over the send button for a long moment before her thumb finally committed. The response never came. What she hadn't realized was that James had spent his silence healing. In the weeks and months that followed his decision to walk away, he didn't just mourn the loss, he rebuilt himself from it. He learned to sit with the loneliness, to distinguish between missing Lily and missing the idea of being chosen. Over time, he no longer woke up expecting her voice. The weight of her absence was no longer a burden, just a quiet place where her memory used to live. He didn't respond to her message, not out of cruelty, but because he had nothing left to give her. The part of him that would have once dropped everything for her return was gone. Lily had taken too long to decide, and in that space, he had found the clarity she never could. He had found peace. Lily, however, was still trapped in the wake of her decision. Every failed attempt at connection felt like another door closing. Her friends, though supportive, couldn't give her what she truly craved, James's presence. His steadiness. The kind of love that had stood before her patiently and asked nothing more than for her to believe in it. But now he was someone else's to believe in. The hardest part for Lily wasn't knowing that James had moved on, it was realizing how gracefully he had done it. There were no angry texts, no dramatic accusations, no emotional retaliation. He didn't try to punish her or make her feel small for what she'd done. He just disappeared from her life like fog retreating from the morning sun. She still caught herself thinking of him in the smallest moments, when her phone buzzed and she hoped it was him, or when she saw a couple at the coffee shop laughing with the ease she used to share with him. The man who used to hold her hand in public without needing a reason was now only accessible through memory. And even those memories were fading, softening at the edges, as if her own mind was trying to protect her from the full weight of her mistake. Meanwhile, James was not bitter. He no longer carried the hurt like armor. He spoke of her gently when asked, saying simply, "It just didn't work out." No one saw the long nights he had endured to get to that place. No one saw the quiet battles he fought with hope before he finally put it down. He wasn't angry with Lily. He had loved her, deeply, sincerely. But love, he had learned, is not just about what you feel. It's about what you choose. And she hadn't chosen him. The aftermath wasn't loud. There was no final confrontation, no dramatic return or fiery closure. There was only stillness, and in that stillness, two people who had once shared everything now shared nothing but silence. Lily would go on, eventually. She would laugh again, love again, maybe even forgive herself one day. But some part of her, quiet and persistent, would always wonder what might have been if she hadn't waited so long to see what was in front of her. And James? James had already learned that sometimes the love we're waiting for arrives, not in the return of the one who left, but in the arms of someone who never questions whether we're worth staying for.